Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm delighted to be here with you again. A new interesting interview. I'm Enrique Alvarez with Logistics with Purpose. I'm with my co-host, Kristi Porter. Kristi, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. It has been really cloudy here in New Jersey, so the sun is out today. It's a little cooler, but I welcome the sun and got my buddy Great Dane sitting beside me. So it's a good day. It's a good day to be out here. It's a great day for an interview, another interesting interview.
Definitely. And I like the fact that we're trying this new software as well. So it's exciting. We have our guinea pig ready and
Yes.
we'll be rolling in a second. But go ahead, Kristi. Why don't you just do us the honor of introducing our guest today?
So I am delighted to introduce Nathan Havey, co-founder of Stakeholder Business and writer and director of the podcast miniseries 10 Things You Should Know About Stakeholder Capitalism, which sounds intriguing, and the Beyond Zero film. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us. Enrique's had the pleasure of meeting you, but I am delighted to have the opportunity now as well.
Likewise, Kristi. And it's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. We've got a lot to get into. You're doing a lot of really cool things. But first, I want to ask you just some quick questions. We'll get you warmed up and answer with just the first thing that comes to mind.
Sounds good.
So, what is one thing you can't live without?
One thing I can't live without. I would say, I'm a family person, and so I'll just say that my wife and kids are something that I don't think I could live without. They're pretty awesome.
That's good. We'll make sure that they know you answered that well here. What is your favorite book?
Favorite book right now is a book called Donut Economics, which turns a lot of some of the classic assumptions that we have about economics on its head and gets us to really consider what is the true goal of commerce, of industry, of business, and it's really inspiring.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. Favorite place to be?
My family has a house in the mountains of southern Colorado, and that is my favorite place to be.
Is a beautiful place. One thing you do to stay productive?
If I haven't kind of thought about planning what I need to get done in a given week, I am not productive. And so it's planning. It's taking a minute to really think through what needs to happen and laying that out on a calendar.
Awesome. And one thing you do to relax at the end of the day?
That's in flux. I would have said, have a drink, but I'm trying to do less of that.
Okay.
And so I think that it's more just a little bit of like a gratitude meditation is the thing that is working for me lately.
That's good. Always good to be grateful.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answers and welcome again to the show. This is amazing to have you. As Kristi was saying, we met each other a while back at the CEO Summit and it's been a pleasure talking to you ever since. Taking a little bit of a quick deviation here to your background, like when you were younger, some of the things that you actually remember from your childhood, something that you kind of grew up and that you can share that kind of shaped who you are now.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I remember a moment where my dad was a photographer and a filmmaker also, and he had a production studio in downtown Denver, and it was always a treat. We lived in the suburbs to get to go into the city and hang out, and I don't know why we were there, but I do remember that the TV was on in the background, and it happened to be sort of the live news coverage of apartheid falling in South Africa. It sticks out in my memory because I feel like up until that point, I'd gone through public education and we'd been taught that slavery and civil rights and, all of that stuff were these big problems, but they were handled. That was all in the past and now everything was good. And I think that as I was watching what was happening in South Africa and my parents were doing their best to explain the context of apartheid and all that kind of stuff, I was like, wait, whoa. This was happening while I've been here living my life and I had no idea about that. And so it sort of was this formative moment of deciding that I wanted to have my life and career be about, continuing that march of progress for creating the world that we wish we had, something that really is a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out. And I didn't know what the hell form that was going to take, but it was sort of looking back, the sort of moment that I had an awakening that there was work to do in the world, and I wanted to be part of that.
Wow. It seems that we still don't know exactly how that's going to look out at the end, years and years after you had that moment.
It's true.
But we continue with the work and we need to make sure that this happens one way or another. So
And
What
what
was
kind
your
of work did your dad do?
Yeah, a documentary film. So he started he fled the structures of very formal Catholicism in his youth, and went out to the uncharted open West. In 1974-ish, and met my mom, and he really wanted to live the life of an artist. He was an armchair philosopher, and just wanted to kind of create things of beauty. And so he got really into photography, which turned into filmmaking. He liked storytelling, and creating films, and he was known as the kind of the Ken Burns of Colorado. And so he's the guy that did most of the historical films about Colorado and the Rocky Mountain West. And so I grew up with that kind of an influence.
Wow.
That's a great nickname. That's impressive. That tells me already a lot about him. So
Yeah.
a very cool lineage. And so I'm curious, obviously now you followed in his footsteps in many ways. Is there something that when you're making a film, a process or a moment or something that comes to mind that you really think, I know exactly where I got this?
Yeah, I think he, like I said, with the armchair philosophy thing, right? He was really into a lot of, I guess, what would have been called New Age, more Eastern philosophy stuff. And one of his favorites was Joseph Campbell, right? And so he wrote the book Hero with a Thousand Faces and a few others. And he had studied through his career all of these different myths and stories that had been told that had survived from antiquity, from all cultures around the world, including indigenous cultures. And he had sort of come up with this theory that there's this kind of central arc to the great stories of humanity, and that it can sort of help us to understand ourselves. And it's the hero's journey. And so I think a lot of folks are probably familiar with that. It's definitely the map of 85-90% of the movies that come out, certainly all of the Marvel universe and Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and all that stuff. And it's this call to adventure that we are greater than we dare to believe, and that if we are willing to, as Campbell said, enter the forest at the darkest point, the place where you can't see what is happening, then that is where you will find the true shape of your own self, and you will come out of it changed, and you will live the journey that you were meant to live in this lifetime. And it's a pretty cool poetic thing, right? And so I really love to tell the stories of the people who have really, really done that, and specifically done it in largely a business context, but have done it in service of the kind of work that needs to be done in the world. And so that's a lot of how that stuff comes together for me.
Back in Colorado, and thanks for sharing that about your dad. He sounds like an amazing person. What was his name?
Jim Havey.
Jim Havey. Well, what was the call to adventure? And you mentioned it recently. So what was the call to you back in those days, and what is the call for adventure now?
Well, there were two sort of big moments. And so one of them was when I was a freshman in high school. I had this older boy that I had looked up to for years. He was a senior then. His name was Peter Nestor. And he had gotten an internship or something working with the mayor of Lakewood, Colorado, our little suburban town. And they were working on some policy initiative. It was, if you even forget what it was to repurpose an old mall to make it more of like a walking, work-live community kind of a thing. And
Ahead of its time.
Well, right,
I know, that's incredible.
Did not care about the issue whatsoever. But Peter was working on this, and I had heard at one point that he needed help organizing volunteers to do like a literature drop, walking door to door through a neighborhood and dropping off campaign materials. And I was like, well, sure, I can help. And, not knowing how it went or that it would be hard or whatever, I just organized like a ton of 13, 14-year-olds to go and do this thing. None of them had ever been asked to do this before. And they all had a lot of free time. And so I got like a lot of people. And I incentivized them by saying, hey, we're going to go walk a couple of precincts and then we're going to have a barbecue at my house. And they were like, sure. And so we covered like an insane amount of the city in one weekend day. And word kind of spread that there was this army of like 14, 13-year-olds around doing this thing. And the mayor ended up showing up at the barbecue.
That is incredible.
And I was like, what? Like,
wow.
That was easy and cool. And now like there's like impact and like this is neat. And so I sort of went the political route for a while and started to just do local politics and state politics. And, by the time I was in college, I also was into theater and storytelling, so I did a double major in theater and political science. I called it the Ronald Reagan School of Success at the time. But then went for grad school and got a job working in the U.S. House of Representatives, and was just trying to do the policy route because I thought that was how you drove change in the world, right? You were active politically, and I could see myself running for office and all that kind of stuff. And then I got into what it actually is to try to organize political change and policy change inside of the U.S. House, and hated it. Just thought it was the worst idea. Like, bless the people that have the patience for it, but I just saw it as a deeply dysfunctional system, and not effective.
Good thing it's changed, right?
It's very different. Yes, very different today.
Well, but I gotta say though, that did it help the fact that you actually had that theater political science gumbo? I mean, how much, and I'm more curious about the theater portion of it. Is it easier, better for a good public policy maker from George Washington University, by the way, to be an actor?
I think that the thing about theater, yes, there's the performative and public speaking aspects and all that kind of stuff, and yeah, that's very, very helpful. But the sort of the narrative creation, the power of storytelling is something that is, I think we know it, but I don't know if we actually know how powerful storytelling is in shaping our ideas, the way we see the world, all that kind of stuff. It's a stat that I read recently is that written language is maybe 4,000 years old, and like the forms of communication in argument, logic, case making, all that kind of stuff, it's about 4,000 years old in society. But storytelling is probably 100,000 years old. And so to say that humans really do think and understand the world in terms of story is very much, it's an understatement, right? And so if you're looking at policy, if you're looking at how to frame policy, how to get people organized, if you're not doing that with a really savvy creation of story, you're not doing it right. And so that is a little bit of an understood superpower. And I'm not saying I have it. I'm just saying that is the way that it works, right? That's what needs to happen. And the thing for me, I guess, is that what I saw in Congress is that there was a game afoot by both parties that was about winning majority. And it was very short term. It was 2-year election cycles, right? And that everything that was happening there was really to try to score political points or deny political points to be able to win majority. And then in theory, that's justified by because our agenda is important and the only way we can get that through is if we have majority. But it's the same thing that happens in capitalism, where if we're playing a really short-term game, we do things that actually defeat the long-term game. And it's just the wrong game. And so when I saw that is the game, I was like, I don't think this is how we get there. And so I got out of there. I met the woman who would become my wife, and she was leaving for law school. We'd been dating for like 3 months, and we had to have a conversation about, is this worth me coming with you to law school, or like, is this over? And we decided it was worth it. So anyway, I exited, but I did not know what the heck I was going to do. And back to your question, Enrique, about kind of the other aha moment or epiphanal moment came in 2010. I didn't really know what I was going to do. So I thought, well, nonprofits would be the other route to try to like do the good work in the world. And so I got a job working for a new media company, we called it back then, doing social media and websites. And it was a for-profit company, but it was serving nonprofits. At the time, I didn't have any understanding about business and for-profits and what that is, really. And so I judged the leadership of that company very harshly for having me mark up the prices of the things that we would sell so that we could make a profit. Because to me at the time, it was like, wait a minute, we're doing this to try to advance the good here. Yeah. Why are we charging them more than, so anyway, I was very naive, and I did a great job of losing 2 of our biggest accounts in the same week and got good and fired. And so at that point, I was really in a spot, not really knowing what to do. And it happened to be that I got a hold of Ray Anderson's book, Confessions of a Radical Industrialist. And in that book, he makes the case that at different points in human history, there have been different dominant institutions in the world that really organized the effort of humanity, right? At one point, it was the church. At one point, it was state power. But really, since the Industrial Revolution, and you could argue the exact timing on this, it's been for-profit corporations that have really organized the effort of humanity around the world. And he makes the case that because it's the most powerful, best resourced institution in the world, it is really the one that must lead the change. And so that sort of idea hit Ray Anderson when he read Paul Hawken's book in 1994 and set in motion what became the interface transformation journey. And as I read that book, I saw a new, more effective pathway to do what I'd always dreamed I wanted to do, which was to really look at how business can be a very, very effective leader of the change that we need to see in the world. And since then, that was in about 2010, I got deep into the conscious capitalism movement and many similar groups. And now in recent years, increasingly all around the world, thanks to Beyond Zero. And that is the work that I am engaged in now.
Fascinating. That's wonderful. I'm curious. So yes, huge shifts. And I think your perspective is actually, I think it's still a perception today. I was actually talking to somebody about this yesterday. I think it's very common, not just coming out of working in government, but if you want to do good, you have to work in nonprofits. And for some reason in 2025, that is still a prevailing theory. And I can't figure out why. And so I'm glad you made the recognition and the shift early. And so whenever you finally, I guess, forgave your bosses internally for trying to make a profit off of nonprofits, did you immediately see that, oh, I want to go into this from a storytelling perspective? Or how did you see kind of your place in this new world?
Yeah, I had no idea. And so this coincided with my wife got a clerkship after she finished law school with the Alaska Supreme Court.
Wow.
And so we moved up to Anchorage, where I knew absolutely no one. And I was trying to figure out how the heck I would do this thing. And the best I had at the time was to sort of work on higher purpose. That companies, if they really were animated by a higher purpose, then that was sort of the first step toward them being impactful. And so I went around and knocked on doors of little mom and pop businesses in and around Anchorage and just started to do what I could do, which was some website, social media, which evolved into communication consulting, right? But trying to get them to talk to me about what their higher purpose was. And I had no idea how to do it right. It was pretty ridiculous in many cases early on, but I spent 2 or 3 years cutting my teeth, sort of understanding what it was and, flying back to every conscious capitalism conference and stuff like that I could, to sort of become increasingly sophisticated, still in a very novice way, but learning, and just trying it out, learning by doing. Fast forward just a bit, I've been at it for 4 years. When my wife's time in Alaska ends and we move to, cutting out some of the story, but we move to northern Michigan, not the UP, but as north as you can get to a little teeny place.
Compared to Alaska, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a similar kind of a thing, tiny little small businesses. Again, I leave a community. I have no idea what's happening. And long story short, she wants to go on this camping trip to South Manitou Island on the last weekend that the boats run. And I'm stressed trying to figure out how the heck I'm going to network and build a practice of consulting or whatever. And I relent and I go, and we are around a campfire ring where there's one campfire ring for multiple campsites. And so we show up and we start talking with these folks. And a lot of what I had been doing in the consulting world was just kind of telling people the stories of some of the cool conscious capitalism examples and interface. And so I launch into that around this campfire, not knowing who's there. Somebody made the mistake of asking me what I did for work. And story time, the guy was Mike McFall. And I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what Big B Coffee was. But he gives me his card on the boat on the way home, and I look him up, and I'm like, whoa, this is $100 million franchise. That's by far the biggest company I'd had access to at that point. And long story short, they hired me, and over the next 3 years, we did a giant culture and purpose transformation, largely based on the way that Interface had done what they did. And so I don't know if you can see, I've got Mike here on the wall. He and Bob were put on the cover of Conscious Company magazine because of that work. And, our relationship and the work that we do together continues to this day. But that sort of was the first real, wow, I can do this. I do know how to do it. And so then that led to opening up a whole bunch of other opportunities. It was pretty cool.
Sure. Well, I'm a blank slate when it comes to Alaska. So I don't know. I don't have any idea what it would be to just go door to door asking people and having these questions. Same thing in smaller towns in northern Michigan. So you were doing it at a very grassroots level, especially early on. What were the conversations? What were you hearing early on in the movement?
I think that it gives some benefit because if you're a small business, you kind of do a lot of this naturally. And it's because you're so proximate to the people that are in your company, right? And so at least from again, speaking in the language of conscious capitalism, if you're looking at conscious culture, generally folks do pretty well with that because they haven't been so abstracted that people are just numbers on a spreadsheet or line items that need to be trimmed to drop more money down to the bottom line. And so you just don't have a lot of the more toxic expressions of hierarchy and capitalism at a small level. Similarly, though, you've got folks that are kind of just in it for whatever the business is, and they don't really consider the broader stakeholders, environment, community. They don't see that they have much agency to change those things. And in truth, they don't have agency to change the meta systems, right? But they actually do have quite a lot of agency in terms of the decisions that they make for their own company. And so they're still constrained by the available possibilities that supply chains and logistics afford and all that kind of stuff. But based on the choices they have tremendous discretion to make those choices. Whereas at larger levels of companies, the approval processes and the getting people on board and it's a lot harder to do change at that level than it is for smaller companies to do it. So I think it just gave a really, really good experience and understanding of some of those dynamics that you wouldn't get if your consulting training was through a McKinsey or a Deloitte or something like that, right? So now, I don't have the other training. I've never done a McKinsey or a Deloitte. I've never been able to do a major consulting engagement inside of a Fortune 500 company. But it's kind of an interesting perspective. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would argue that you need both at the same time, right? In order for change to really be impactful and for change to actually be real. And you went on to you're the co-founder of Stakeholder Business. And before you tell us a bit more about that business, what does stakeholder mean to you? I mean, can you define the term for us in your own words, not using maybe conscious capitalism lingo, but what does it mean to you as an individual?
Totally. Yeah, and I guess for me, one way to think of stakeholders is the things and the people without whom you could not do your business, right? There's a book called The Spirit of the Glacier Speaks by a shaman from the Lakota and Andean native traditions. And in the Andean language, there's a concept of Ayni, I think is the way you say it. It's Ayni. And it's basically this, I'll use the word covenantal relationship because it's not transactional. It's not that I'm going to sort of take care of the relationship because you are giving me something I need, but it's deeper than that. It's kind of the recognition that we're in this together for better or worse, and I'm going to take care of you because you're worthy of care, right? And then, yes, you're probably going to take care of me too, but I'm not doing it for the reciprocity. I'm doing it because you are worthy of care, right? And so there's that kind of a thing. And so if you're looking at the systems upon which you depend, there's that kind of a covenantal relationship that I think ideally we would have. And that's the real essence of stakeholder, if that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense to me, and I hope some of our listeners find that rational and logical as well. But I think that that's just the essence of being a human, right? I think that you actually have that deep down and you want to care for each other because you know that if you do, everyone will be better off, everyone will be protected. And it's just frustrating some of these days when we find out kind of not being honest to that very universal law, I would say, right? And we're trying to get all these different things, shorter term gains, as opposed to really thinking about we are all in this world together, whether we like it or not, whether you want to call it one way or the other. And that's something that you very early on realized, and then you also put in practice as you were telling all these different stories from all these different businesses. And before we go into the actual Beyond Zero movie, which I know everyone wants to get in and get a little more details about, Tell us a little bit about the stakeholder business, but then also as you progress, since you were in Colorado with your dad, I'm guessing you kept practicing this directing. I mean, I'm guessing filmmaking was still your passion. You still make all these personal videos that kind of led to the storytelling through film at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, and it's weird though, Enrique, because I literally just in the past couple of months have I connected the dots on that I've always made videos and films. Like I don't know if it was like sort of the don't want to follow in my father's footsteps, like young man thing. But I have. You are correct. I've ever since there was the ability for amateur people to be putting films and videos and stuff together, I've always done it, and I've done it just because I love it. It's a total passion area. But I didn't do it in earnest until Beyond Zero. And so that was, 2017, I think, is when I met Aaron Mizan in Atlanta at a storytelling event that was brought to Atlanta in partnership with the Conscious Capitalism chapter there. Hearing... So the book I read for Interface, right, stops in 2010 because that's when Ray wrote it. And so I had been telling the story as of 2010 all the way up to like 2017. And in 2017, I heard what had happened over the subsequent 7 years and what the plan was for the next few. And it blew my mind as big as my mind had been blown when I read the book the first time. And I started to really get this understanding that people don't know this thing. They need to know it. And then the next year, I had a chance to meet Jim Hartzfeld, who was one of the original players in the Interface story, and he told me all this stuff that was not in Ray's book about the early years. And I was like, holy smokes. And I saw a hero's journey. I saw the whole thing. I was just like, somebody needs to make this into a movie. And I did not relate to myself as a filmmaker. I was a consultant, right?
Right.
But I just could not put the notion away. And I approached my dad and said, because I can't edit, I can't shoot at that level. I might be able to write, but that was it. And so I said, would you and the team be interested in considering that? And he's like, if you can put the budget and the deal together, we would totally consider that. And so I was like, well, I've never done that before. But I went and actually asked Mike and Bob from Bigby if they would be willing to put up some seed capital to help me get a first shoot under my belt and create a trailer that I could then go use to create other funding. And they said yes. And so then it's like, all right, we're off to the races on this. And then, one thing led to another. And by 2020, we had the movie done.
Wow. Well, tell us about Beyond Zero. We now know a little bit more of the behind the series and or behind the movie and what led you there, but tell us more about it. What is it about? Clearly you have a huge passion for it and a driving force, and we're going to get it done, but yeah, let's talk more about it.
Yeah, so the way to understand it, I think, is that 1994, Ray Anderson had been he'd lived the entrepreneur's dream. He had founded a carpet tile manufacturing company. He had worked in another big carpet company as a young man, fresh out of college. He had seen the innovation of a carpet tile that had happened in the UK and was like, this is going to revolutionize the industry. We need to do this. But the company that he was working for didn't get it. And so he was like, well, I have to do this. And so he, at great personal risk, founded Interface, 1974, and had built it by 1994 into a Fortune 500 billion dollar or even more company. And had done it. He had done it. And in 1994, he was sort of in a place of trying to figure out what was next when the company lost a massive order in California because they couldn't answer the question, what is Interface doing for the environment? And Ray remembered a day in 1974 when he had all of his capital equipment set up, ready to go, in a warehouse, in a factory, and not one order on the books. And so he remembered that every order is like the next heartbeat for a company, right? And when he lost one, he took it super seriously. And so it sort of sent him into a little bit of a tailspin, asking all of his executives, what do they mean? We're not doing enough for the environment. We comply with the law. Right. What else is there for business to do? What are you talking about? And so he doesn't know what to do. And then he creates a task force to go figure it out. And the task force says, okay, Ray, come tell us your vision. And he's like, no, figure it out. We need your vision. And so finally he agrees to make this speech on August 31st of 1994. And a couple of weeks before that, he has no idea what the hell he's going to say. And serendipitously, I actually tell the backstory that's not in the movie on this. There was one of his right-hand people, was this woman named Joyce Laval. And her daughter had gone through a very early environmental science class in her college, and they had read a book called The Ecology of Commerce by Paul Hawken. And she had been at her mother saying, you really need to understand what carpet does in the world and what all of industry does. It is not good. And you need to be accountable for this, and you need to get this book to your boss so that you guys can figure it out, right? So that's going on in the background. Ray is having this moment, and sure enough, Joyce is able to get that book onto his desk right in this moment, and he takes it home and he reads it, and it blows his mind. He's an engineer by training. He's got a phenomenal, I guess, just sobriety about the way that systems work. And Paul Hawken in that book lays out that all of the life support systems of the planet Earth were in decline in 1994, all of them. And Ray looks at it and has what he calls a spear in the chest moment, realizing that he is a plunderer of the earth, that all of his success has come at the expense of the life support systems of the planet, as has the success of humanity at that point, right? But he's not one who says, well, what we need to do is we need to stop all of this and we need to go back to a pre-industrial way of living, because that's just not going to work. So we have to figure out how to get the Industrial Revolution to go through a second Industrial Revolution, to get all of the manufacturing processes that we use for everything in the world to reinvent themselves to be in line with the life support systems of nature. Right? And so he has all this hit him in one dark night of the soul, and he shows up on August 31st, 1994, and lays this all out to a team of about 18 business leaders from around the world for Interface, and they think he's gone crazy.
Yeah.
Oh,
right? They think he's totally lost it. And so begins the hero's journey. Right? You can hear it in the way that it happens. And so Ray is unrelenting, and 20 years later, Interface is recognized by the UN as one of the most sustainable companies in the world. This piece of carpet tile actually is carbon sequestering. They have got it so dialed in that the process is so efficient that when you add a little bit of bio-based material into the backing, you actually get a negative carbon signature on this thing. So as they're doing their business now, it's actively sequestering carbon. And so that's one of many, many, many examples of the way that they figured out how to completely reimagine the way that they do their business in ways that were highly profitable. They're running laps around their competitors on this kind of stuff. They are the brand in the world for anybody that cares about sustainability and interiors. And they've been able to have the company work great. Now, is it a hockey stick kind of a growth? No, it's not. But, if you ask their chairman why that is, he goes, because nobody cares about our stock. We're part of an industry portfolio. We rise and fall with carpet. Right? There just isn't differentiation in terms of the broader stock market. So you can't tell that story about Interface, but what you can, were you to factor in the actual environmental costs that almost all manufacturers pass off as externality. Right? If you were to incorporate those into a balance sheet to look at the true performance of the company, including the value that is created or destroyed in terms of environmental and social, right? If you were to put a dollar amount on that and include it, most companies are actually in the red. They operate in the red. They are actively destroying value in excess of the financial value they're creating. If you looked at Interface's balance sheet on that, they're not doing that. And so if we had a different way of accounting for all of this, you would be able to see very, very clearly the way that a company like Interface is performing as a lighthouse to help guide the rest of industry for where we need to get.
It's incredible and inspiring, and I've had the pleasure of watching the movie twice. And if you guys don't mind, I've never done this before. We've never done this before in our show, but we could play a little clip from the movie Beyond Zero for people that are just listening to this episode and don't actually have the YouTube version of it. Could you just set it up? You've mentioned a lot about what the movie's about. I'm talking about the little 2-minute kind of thriller of the movie Beyond Zero film. Set it up for us, and I'll just try to figure out how to share my screen and play it.
Yeah, we can do that, and I'll see if I can share my screen.
That would be even better. That way I don't have to have the technical skills to pull it off, because I'm not going to be able to do it.
Let me see here. Share screen, and then we just...
That's really fascinating. Had you come to me and just pitched a behind the scenes of a carpet company, I
No
probably
way,
would not
right?
have invested, but you made it sound incredibly fascinating.
Well, that's the power of storytelling, and I think that's what changes mindsets and changes the world, and that's why what you do, Nathan, is so critical for the rest of the things and the pieces to fall kind of after it.
Thank you. And here is that trailer. If the audio doesn't come through, let me know, but I think it will. So here it is.
By civilization's definition, I'm a captain of industry. By my own definition, I am a plunderer of the earth and a legal thief. Someday, people like me may be put in jail.
He said, we're going to make this company a sustainable enterprise. And there was simply silence.
I mean, Ray didn't have a clue what the roadmap was on this. He just knew that something had to be done.
No greenwashing at all. It was actually hands-on, feet on the ground. Let's figure this out.
They said, go outside, look at nature, and what can you learn?
The rest of the competitors were going, hey, we got to get on board.
I was really concerned when Ray passed away about the mission.
So my job when I came in was to really get the company back on track financially. I was probably still a climate change skeptic.
Our feeling is that we were screwed.
I had never been forced to look at the science. Humans messed up the environment by accident. Imagine what happens when we fix the environment with intent.
It just makes total business sense. I don't know how companies are going to survive in the next 20 years if they're not on this journey.
And so now the challenge for leaders is not, can we do it? The question is, are you willing to do it?
Amazing. That's a very inspiring, and honestly, I think that's just going to be what companies need to do if they want to keep in business, right? Which is something that I really appreciate from the movie. It's like, we're not doing it because we're nice or because we are different. We're doing it because if we don't do it, we're going to go out of business. And I feel like that's something that we need to keep hammering in, and we need to keep saying, because some companies just don't see it, but that will be the future.
Yeah, and I was just trying to actually dig into some of the writing that you see all over right now, talking about, we need to put a stake in stakeholder capitalism, ESG is gone, good riddance, stuff like that, which, I'm trying to understand it. And the basic argument is that if you go to stakeholder capitalism versus the shareholder model that has really been dominant for the past 50 years, that has been very successful at creating a ton of financial capital. It's made a lot of people very, very rich. And if you look at the poverty, the average quality of life, the length of life over the past 50 years, humanity is making phenomenal progress. And much of that is thanks to capitalism, and for the last 50 years, shareholder primacy capitalism. But if you then factor in things like inequity, the gross inequity that we've got, if you look at it, certainly in terms of environment, it is pretty clear that it's very, very unsustainable. And the folks that are really proponents of a shareholder capitalism model argue that companies will lose focus if they are trying to serve all of their stakeholders, and if they're trying to drive environmental goals that are separate from their business and do DE&I, and that they're trying to serve too many interests, and they'll lose focus and they won't do anything well. There's some truth in that. There is some truth in that. But the thing that they just don't deal with in any of these arguments is, okay, then how would you suggest we solve the problem of the fact that we're killing the life support systems of Earth? And the closest that I've seen in any of those things is, well, it's just not the role of business. It's government that has to say that. But if you look at the way government works, as we've discussed, business also actively flummoxes the effort of policymakers to try to address this problem. And so it feels either a little bit like blinders,
Right,
or a little disingenuous. And let's give people credit, and let's just say that they're really focused on one thing. But it's just the level of complexity that we have to struggle with right now is something that is difficult. It is different. We are not wired to do this as human beings. Our minds do not work this way very well, and we've got to figure out how to get there. Right. So anyway, that's a thing. But the chairman of Interface argues that people are going to have to transform. And what will likely come is, it's like it'll happen gradually and then all at once. And so if companies aren't feeling an absolute necessity to do this right now, okay, but when the necessity gets here, if you're not already well positioned for it, it's going to be too late. And so I guess we'll see. I guess we will see. But I think that, there's a great New Yorker cartoon that is, this sort of debate that looks like it's in Congress or the UN or something. And the one speaker says, so wait a minute, you're telling me if we invest in green jobs and we have all this economic growth and climate change isn't as dire as we thought, that we did all this for nothing? And the truth is, the way that companies have been pursuing some environmental goals, some DE&I, has been from a place of a side project. And they haven't really done the work to figure out how you actually integrate that stuff into the way you do your core business. And then the critics have a point. But the way to do it, the way Interface did it, right, is that this wasn't a side project. This was absolutely core to their strategy. And when it's absolutely core to your strategy, it drives employee engagement, it drives innovation, it drives competitiveness in ways that actually create outsized returns. And so the way you do this is something that I think there is a third kind of a way, where you've got people that are saying we need to, you've got people saying, no, it's going to be a distraction for business. But you can take both of those folks at their word and find the way that it becomes the core focus of the business. And that's where we find, like, there's one of the things we say in 10 Things You Should Know About Stakeholder Capitalism is there's thesis, there's always antithesis, right? The things that are wrong with the thesis, and that eventually there's something called synthesis, where the proponents and the opponents are able to actually agree on something, and that's generally the right pathway forward, and that's where we got to get.
I love that. Well, kind of along those lines, it can be, obviously, Interface is a great example, but it's really hard for legacy companies, very large companies, to turn that ship, to make that shift. You've worked in consulting, you've done research in a lot of these other ways in your storytelling and talking to so many people in conscious capitalism and otherwise. So even talking about making it the core thing and not stuck in a committee or, a foundation or something like that, it's still a big process. So how would you recommend people, what are a few steps, what are a few questions to ask? How can we help people kind of begin to make this new mindset shift?
I think there's two really important things. And so the first thing is that we need to sort of recognize that we as business people, but broader than that, in broader society, we exist within the systems that were created that have the world work the way it works. And so we are all complicit, like Ray was, in being part of the problem. And there's nothing shameful about that. I don't believe in finger wagging and telling people that they're bad and wrong, right? We are all in this, and we're all in these systems. And so the best that we can sort of see the systems that we're in, the better, I guess the better equipped we are to be able to make intelligent choices with the right information, right? And so I want to say this in a specific way for business people in particular, is that if they've been to business school, they were taught a certain way of seeing the world. right? If they read business media, all of that is still framed in that way. Let's call it shareholder supremacy, right? The associations that they're part of, they all still work in that way, right? Enrique, I think you're part of EO, are you not?
Right.
So just not to blame EO, YPO, there's lots of the local chambers of commerce, all of these associations, they are all still obsessed with financial growth, and they don't have a lot of space for talking about the social and environmental performance of companies. There's some, but the people that are really held up as great exemplars are still the ones that are performing best in financial capital alone, right? Okay, got it. Consultants, especially the bigger consultants, they're all attuned with those goals in mind. And so as a business person, especially as a CEO, all of the influences that you take in a given day prime you for shareholder primacy. And that's the system, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to do something different, you need to consciously get yourself into a community and to get other things in your space so that you can constantly start to see the systems as they work and begin to look for the alternative, which gives you a competitive advantage because you're looking at it a way that nobody else is looking at it, right? So that is one of the systems that's at play. So number one is consciously choose the influences that you're allowing into your space, right? And make sure that they're consistent with your goals and your aspirations. And that's a big deal. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you got to pick your thing, right? It's important to be conscious of all the things and do what you can to not do active harm in some of these other areas. But there is a thing that you are uniquely suited, you personally and with your company, to go after. And when you are able to make the shift on that, you make it possible for all of the rest of us to just do your thing, right? And so carpet, as an example, right? Ray didn't go and try to just plant a bunch of forests all over the place. He focused on his core thing, which was carpet. And now it is possible for the rest of us to not have to go do a bunch of work and innovation. We can just buy the damn carpet. Right. Okay, this one's solved. We got this one, right? And interestingly, the fiber, right, the nylon that's on here, it was technically impossible to recycle nylon. Nobody knew that you could do that when they decided that they needed to recycle nylon. And it was a decade-long innovation journey, not by them, but by one of their suppliers, an Italian company called Aquafil, that cracked the technological nut on this and made recycled nylon a thing. And so, great, they solved that one. Now, Gucci, Prada, Levi's, they can all use this fiber without having to go fix that, right? That's the way that this whole thing is going to go down, is we all just have to figure out which one of those things we are going to solve and make available to the world, right? And you know what we call that? Business. It's just business, right? So that's what we got to do. And there's another thing that Big B is up to right now, just since we mentioned them. If you look at the way that the commodity marketplace sources coffee, it's awash in awful externalities that nobody wants to really talk about, right? And so that's one of the new storytelling projects that I'm working on with them right now, is trying to have that same thing happen for coffee, right? Because I don't know, you drink coffee, I drink coffee every morning. That's one of those things, right? And yes, you can go and have to do all of the homework to try to figure out how to be an ethical buyer of coffee. We're not gonna, until somebody does the work and makes it easy, right? That's what they're up to. And that's the thing that all of us need to be engaged in right now, is what is the thing that you are suited to be able to go do where you can just provide the solution. And once that solution exists, you know how much easier it's going to be for the Fortune 500s to be like, oh shit, we just buy this and not that. Yes, it has to be that simple, right? And that, I believe, is what's coming. And so if companies are not really ambitiously going for that right now, they might find themselves in a situation where somebody else says, no, don't buy that, buy this, and then they're toast.
Right. Well, and guess what? That kind of comes full circle back to the thing that you said at the beginning. That is the only sustainable way to maximize shareholder value. So all I'm saying is, all this argument between the stakeholder and shareholder, I think it just resolved by having a longer term, right? So if you look and your vision's longer term, the way you maximize shareholder value is by maximizing stakeholder value. If you are just narrow-sighted and want to make a quick buck, even if it's great, because sure enough, the way capitalism is understood these days definitely brings wealth to the world and certain communities, not all of them, clearly, but it could be even better, right? So it just depends on what you're measuring up against. And yes, are we better off? Sure. We have been even better off, then certainly. But no, this has been great, and I really appreciate you kind of like turning the whole thing back to its origins and questioning the way that we conduct business today. That's very important.
Yeah, and I guess I would just say one other thing back to one of the questions, right, of this Donut Economics book that's my favorite right now. You know, we really need to start from a place of what really is the goal, because we conflate GDP growth and business growth with the goal. And the theory, right, is that GDP growth and business growth is the thing that creates wealth. And with wealth, people can have the things that they need at an individual and societal level to be able to pursue happiness, right? And that is true. That is true. However, it does seem to have a bit of an upper boundary where actual happiness, right, and wealth seem to decouple somewhere around $100,000. And I'm not saying that you cap wealth and nobody can make more than that. No. I'm just saying that after that, we're chasing wealth for its own purpose and no longer because it's serving the true goal, which I think would be something like a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out, right? And so GDP does the same thing. Where even the person who created GDP said that this would be a horrible single measure of the performance of an economy. Because it doesn't, you cut down trees and that's good for GDP, right? You have more sick people, that's good for GDP. The incentives are misaligned. And so we have to have a slightly more sophisticated outlook at how we're measuring the actual performance of companies and economies. And I believe that the goal of that performance, as Kate Rayworth says in Donut Economics, needs to be helping all people meet the basic needs of a thriving life. And we have to do that within the environmental constraints of the ecosystem.
Right.
That's what we need to do. Right?
And it's not a zero-sum game, right? I mean, some people think that in order for me to have more, someone else has to have less, and that's just dumb. Now, I don't know how else to put it. That's just dumb.
Technologically speaking, that might have been true until about 1940, 1960, depending on what you're looking at. But by the 70s, it had been demonstrated again and again that there literally is enough, that human beings are efficient enough, that we can create more with less, such that the needs of even the 8 billion people on Earth today and the 9 billion people that are going to be here in another 15, 20 years, there is enough for everybody to be able to meet their needs and then some. Yeah. And so, yes, it was once true that it was a relative zero-sum game because of the limits of our technology, but we've already crossed that threshold. We did it 50 years ago. And so, no, it is not a zero-sum game.
Similar with supply chains. We had the pleasure of interviewing Annie Engel the other day from Cotopaxi, and she actually said something that really stuck with me, which is that we have enough textiles in this world to make clothing for 9 generations of humans already in stock. We have enough textiles in stock today to isn't that mind-boggling? It's incredible.
Totally.
Honestly, I think companies are starting to realize this. This is not a movement. I think that's starting to become a very sound economic strategy for a lot of corporations, like, of course, Interface and some others out there. So thank you so much. Nathan, how can our listeners connect with you and, of course, learn more about not only Stakeholder Business, but then also about the movie and some of your future projects, which I know are plenty?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Enrique. So Stakeholder Business is I mentioned that CEOs need to find a place where the influences that are coming at them are the ones they need, not the default. And so Stakeholder Business is a community for CEOs that are seeking to build companies of consequence. And so if anybody's interested in that, they can go to stakeholderbusiness.com. And if you're not a CEO, or even if you are, I am just a couple weeks away from launching, somewhat begrudgingly, nathanhavey.com. But the thing that I'm excited about is that I'm starting to very deliberately play a game that is in line with everything that we've talked about here, and I call it the best world game. And the goal of the game is to see how we create the best world and to see how many points we can rack up each month, each quarter, each year. And it's a cool game. And so if you want to come check that out, again, I don't know when we're releasing this, but nathanhavey.com, there will be a spot to sign up for updates where you'll get, if you like the kinds of stuff we're talking about here, lots more where that came from, and that's how to get that.
Yeah, I have no doubt lots more to come from you. You've dropped a lot of great books here, a lot of great ideas. I can tell you're the kind of person who is actively reflecting and learning how to get better and trying to figure out what's next. So yeah, I'm sure lots more exciting projects on the horizon. And of course, where can people go to watch Beyond Zero if they want to do that?
Well, right now, they need to be on Cathay Pacific or on JetBlue or on a Canadian airline whose name I keep forgetting that just got the movie. I don't have it. Anyway, that's where it's publicly available. We do work with companies to bring private screenings of Beyond Zero in to train teams. Educators can get it for free to use in their classrooms. All of that is beyondzerofilm.com. And we are hoping to have an announcement that the film will be available on a streaming platform this summer, but I do not yet have confirmation on that. So we've been working on that for a long time.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, beyondzerofilm.com is where to go for information on Beyond Zero.
That's a good teaser. Thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation. This has been a lot of fun. I know I've learned a lot. I know our listeners will too. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. I can tell there's always a number of things going on in your brain. So thanks for pausing for a minute to be able to talk to us. Thank you, of course, to our listeners who are diligent about tuning in with us to hear these incredible stories. We appreciate the community that you're building here with us. And if you want to hear another terrific conversation, then we've got one ready for you in 2 weeks. So we'll see you then. Thanks, everybody.